Hello and welcome to Padai on YouTube channel. This is for the class 10, chapter 6 and the fifth part, transportation in a human beings. So basically blood is transported to the whole body. So we are going to study about the heart and the blood in this section. We have seen in the previous section that blood transports food, oxygen, and waste material in our body. In class 9th, we learned about the blood being a fluid connective tissue. Blood consists of the fluid medium called the plasma, in which the cells are suspended. Plasma transport food, carbon dioxide, nitrogenous waste in a dissolved form. So oxygen is carried by the red blood cell. Many other substances like salt are also transported by the blood. We thus need a pumping organ to push the blood around the body, a network of tubes which reach all the tissue, and a system in a place to ensure that the network can be repaired if damaged. So the first most important part which pumps the blood through the body is our heart. The heart is a muscular organ which is as big as our fist. Because both oxygen and carbon dioxide have to be transported by the blood, the heart has a different chambers to prevent the mixing, right? To prevent the oxygen rich blood mix with the carbon dioxide, right? The blood containing carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide rich blood has to reach the lungs for the carbon dioxide to be removed, and the oxygenated blood from the lungs has to be brought back to the heart, and this oxygen rich blood is then pumped to the rest of the body. We can follow this process step by step. First, oxygen rich blood from the chambers of the heart on the left atrium. The left atrium relaxes when it is collect this blood. It then contract while the next chamber, the left ventricle, expand so that the blood is transferred to it. When the muscular left ventricle contracts in the system, the blood pumped out to the body. Deoxygenated blood comes from the body to the upper chamber on the right hand side, that is the right atrium, as it expands. As the right atrium contracts, the corresponding lower chambers of the right ventricles dilates. These transfer of blood to the right ventricle, which in turn pumps into the lungs of oxygenation. Since ventricles have to pump blood into a various organs, they have a thicker muscular walls than the atria do. Walls ensure that the blood does not flow backwards, so when the atria or the ventricles contract. So this is how the blood moves in the heart, four chambers. Now oxygen enters the blood in the lungs. The separation of right side and the left side of the heart is useful to keep oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from mixing. Such separations allow a highly efficient supply of oxygen to the body. This is useful in animals that have high energy needs, such as birds and mammals, which constantly use energy to maintain their body temperature. In animals that do not use energy for this purpose, the body temperatures depend on the temperature in the environment. Those animals, like amphibians or many reptiles, have a three-chamber heart and tolerate some mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood streams. Fishes, on the other hand, have only two chambers to their heart, and the blood is pumped to the gills, is oxygenated there, and passed directly to the rest of the body. Thus, blood goes only once through the heart in the fish during one cycle of passage through the body. On the other hand, it goes through the heart twice during each cycle in other vertebrates. This is known as a double circulations. So what we have understood from here It's depend upon what kind of the energy requirement by an organism, the way the heart is designed into them. There are four chambers, two chambers heart present in various living organisms. The tubes or the blood vessels that carries our blood to and from the heart. So arteries are the vessels which carries the blood away from the heart to a various organs of the body. Since the blood emerges from the heart under high pressure, the arteries have a thick elastic valves. Veins collect the blood from a different organ and bring it back to the heart. They do not need a thick wall because the blood in these has no longer under pressure. Instead, they have valves that ensure that the blood flows only in a one direction. So here, arteries which carries the blood to all the other part of the body has push or a pump through the heart, so it has a pressure, and when it coming back towards the heart it doesn't have the pressure, so valves are kept there to keep it moving in a one direction. On reaching on an organ or a tissue, the artery divides into a smaller and smaller vessel to bring the blood in a contact with the individual cells. The small vessels have walls which are one cell thick and are called the capillaries. Exchange of material between the blood and the surroundings cells take place across these thin walls. So capillaries then join together to form a vein that conveys the blood away from the organ or a tissue. So capillary is a network of a very tiny small cells that allow the material to transfer. Maintenance by platelets. What happens if these systems of tube develop a leak? Think about this situation. When we injured or start bleeding naturally, the loss of blood from the system has to be minimized. In addition, leakage would lead to a loss of pressure, which would reduce the efficiency of the pumping system. To avoid this, the blood has a platelet cells which circulate around the body and plug this leak by helping the clot the blood at this point of injuries. So blood contains the platelets that help the blood to clot and stop the bleeding. Lymph. There is another type of fluid also involved in transportation. This called lymph or tissue fluid. Through the pores present in the walls of the capillaries, some amount of plasma, protein, and blood cells escape into the intercellular space in the tissue to form this tissue fluid or lymph. It is similar to the plasma of blood but colorless and contain less protein. Lymph drains into lymphatic capillaries from the intercellular space, which join to the large lymph vessel that finally opens into the larger veins. Lymph carries a digested and absorbed fat from intestine and drain excess fluid for extracellular space back into the food, blood. That is the functions of the lymph. Now, transportation in the plants. So we have discussed earlier how the plant takes a simple compounds such as a carbon dioxide and in photosynthesis energy stored in the chlorophyll contained organs, namely leaves. The other kind of raw material needed for the building of plant bodies will also have to be taken up separately. For plant, the soil is the nearest and the richest source of raw materials like nitrogen, phosphorus, and other minerals. The absorption of the substance therefore occurs through the part in contact with the soil, namely roots. If the distance between soil contracting organs and chlorophyll containing organs are small, energy and raw material can easily diffuse to all parts of the plant body. But if this distance become large because of a change in the plant body design, diffusion process will not be sufficient to provide a raw material in a leaves and energy in a root. A proper system of transportation is therefore essential in such situations. So basically, whatever the plant requires receives from the soil, and through the transpiration, plant lose the water. So it must have the proper system to receive the all raw material for the photosynthesis process, as well as when the food is prepared and must be distributed to each part of the plant. Energy needs differ between different body design. Plants do not move, and plant bodies have a large proportion of dead cells in many tissues. As a result, plants have a low energy needs and can use a relatively slow transport system. The distance over which transport systems have to operate, however, can be very large in a plants such as a very tall trees. Plants transport system will move energy stores from leaves and raw materials from roots. These two pathways are constructed as independently organized conducting tubes. The xylem moves water and minerals obtained from the soil. The other phloem transport products of photosynthesis from the leaves where they are synthesized to other parts of the plant. We have studied the structure of this tissue in the detail in class 9 about the work of xylem and phloem. I guess you remember about the transportation system in the plant. Transport of water. So in xylem tissue, vessels and tracheas of the roots, stems and leaves are interconnected to form a continuous systems of water conducting channels reaching all part of plant. At the root, cells in contact with the soil actively take up ions. This creates a difference in the concentrations of the ions between the roots and the soils. Water, therefore, move upwards into the roots from the soil to eliminate this difference. This means that there is a steady movement of water into the root xylem, creating a column of water, and that is steadily pushed upward, right? It's kind of the system where the loss of water create a suction for the roots to absorb the more water and move it towards the upward. However, this pressure by itself is unlikely to be enough to move water over the height that we commonly see in the plants. Plants use another strategy to move water in the xylem upward to the highest point of the plant body. Provided that the plant has an adequate supply of water, the water which is lost through the stomata is replaced by the water from the xylem vessel in the leaf. In fact, evaporation of the water molecules from the cells of the leaf create the suction, which pulls water from the xylem cells of the root. The loss of water in the form of vapor from the aerial parts of the plant is known as a transpiration. Thus, transpirations help in the absorptions and upward movement of the water and minerals dissolved in the form of root to the leaves. It also helps in temperature regulation. The effect of the root pressure in transport of water is more important at night. During the day, when the stomata are open, the transpiration spool become the major driving force in the movement of water in the xylem. Transport of food and the other substance. So far as we have discussed the transport of water and minerals in the plant, now let us consider how the product of the metabolic process, particularly photosynthesis, are moved from leaves where they are formed to the other parts of the plant. So this transport of soluble products of photosynthesis is called translocation, and it occurs in the part of a vascular tissue which is known as the phloem. Beside the product of photosynthesis, the phloem is specially delivered to the storage organs of fruits and seeds, and to growing organs. The translocation of food and the other substance take place in the sieve tube which the help of the adjacent companion cells both in upward and downward directions. So the sieve tube translocate the food prepared by the leaves into both directions. Unlike transport In the xylem, which can be largely explained by simple physical process, force, the translocation in a phloem is achieved by utilizing energy. Material like a sucrose is transferred into phloem tissue using energy from ATP. This increases the osmotic pressures of the tissue, causing water to move into it. This pressure moves the material in the phloem to tissue which have less pressure. This allows the phloem to move material according to the plant's need. For example, in the spring, the sugar stored in the roots or stem tissue would be transported to the buds, which needs energy to grow. Right. So these use osmotic pressure to move the product or the food into various part of the plant. That's the end of the section.